Hi, and welcome to the Generation Gap podcast. My name is Mary French Murphy.
And I'm Bill French, and I'm Mary's grandfather. And obviously, we have different perspectives. And one of the things that we like is sharing our perspectives. We're not even asking you to agree with them, but we are suggesting that in our modern society, there's so much access to information. Study it yourself, find out what the different perspectives are, and form your own opinion. And just don't be a reflection or a parroting of someone else's opinion. So that's what we're here. And today we're going to talk about.
We're going to be talking about climate change and environmental. What does it mean to take care of our environment, and how does that fit into our lifestyle? So we're just kind of diving into that very big topic
Yeah,
today.
and it's a biggie. As a matter of fact, for the last number of years, since there's been such emphasis on climate change, and I've been always a proponent. Let's keep environment and climate change two different subjects. They're definitely related, but my concern, as I've observed in the last 10 years, with so much focus on climate change, there seems to be backing away from just everyday good stewardship of our environment. And the reality is, if we have a good environment, we will impact climate change in one fashion or the other. So that's a premise I take, and I have some information that I'll share, but I'm kind of more curious where you're coming from, Mary.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think when people talk about taking care of the environment, some of the things we think about are, well, I remember even when I was young, there was Earth Day, and everyone would turn off their lights for that. And that I remember about, I don't know how many years ago now, it just kind of stopped happening. People stopped doing that. But when I hear environment, take care of your environment in a public and social way, I think of Earth Day, turning off your lights, and uh, climate change. That's the big thing that when you hear about environment, that's where I think that's where my mind goes to in just the public sphere. But I think it's very interesting. And paper straws. And paper straws too. Um, so I think it's funny how when we talk about taking care of the environment, we kind of tend to zone in on certain things like reducing gases so that we don't create a greenhouse of gases in the atmosphere, or moving to paper straws because we want to save the turtles. But I would say that taking care of the environment, it's so multifaceted. There's so many different aspects to it
Yeah,
apart from those things,
yeah,
right? And when it comes to paper, I think it's funny how people zone in on the paper straws because even like recyclable containers and the amount of plastics that you see in packaging everywhere, like there's a lot of plastic apart from plastic straws. So
yeah,
I think it's funny that we zone in on that, whereas
yeah,
we are such a wasteful society, like, and that goes down a whole other little loophole of
yeah,
waste in first world countries.
yeah.
But yeah.
It's kind of interesting. If I go back, like taking care of the environment, we didn't even talk about climate change. It was in the background, don't get me wrong. But probably around 1980, there was a real focus on taking care of the environment. And the one story I like sharing, I was president of a company, and actually my son John was the one that kept hammering me over the head at the time. His awareness of kind of environment was much better than mine. So I started looking into it. And so as a company, I'll give you a good example, and this is not a plug for Moore Packaging in Barrie, but that one of the things that we realized as we were a growing company, we had tons and tons of cardboard, and it was going into the landfill
Mm-hmm.
every week.
Mm-hmm.
And at first that was okay because we didn't pay for it. And then all of a sudden we had to have our own dumpster because we had, and it's starting to cost a lot of money. And coincidentally, a salesman um, came and kind of visited us, said, we'd like to provide, your cardboard boxes. It's recycled materials, and we will take all your cardboard back if you make a long-term agreement with us to kind of buy our boxes out of recycled material. So instantly, tons of material came out of the landfill.
Hmm.
and it was being reused. And I was in there, and if anybody knows what a videotape is nowadays, or like a cassette tape, a video cassette. Well, we manufactured our own, but when we get shipments of the tape itself, it had sponge and everything, cardboard that we had to again throw in the kind of landfill. And so I threw it out to a couple of our major manufacturers that provided our materials. Said, "Is there anything you can do to eliminate, all this waste?" And a company came to us and they came with a great idea. They said, "We have these large pallets that we're designing that when you're finished with them, you just fold them up and we'll take them back and we'll send you new materials." So all of a sudden, there was no packaging associated with buying this raw material. And the reason I say all this is I think there was more emphasis on really taking care of the environment then than there is today. And that, to me, is shameful because we did focus on those things. And just to kind of go off on a little tangent, let's face it, the fuel efficiency of an automobile today and emissions is probably 5% of what it was in the 70s and 80s. But what are we doing? Putting bigger engines in cars and all that. And we're still less than we had before. But the reality is we could eliminate half our automotive greenhouse gases by simply controlling the size of the vehicle. And quite honestly, I always suggested, why don't they do, if you have a 1,000 kind of pound car that you're permitted a liter of engine or something like that. But we don't even think of doing things like that anymore. We just say it's fuel efficient and all that. But the reality is a well-tuned car from the 70s that weighed probably 3 times as much as now, if you kind of compared them, probably wasn't much difference in fuel economy. So I think there's lots of things, and just think what that would do, because let's switch to the climate change now. So it would impact it. And I don't think I have any problem. We have climate change. The problem is, the reality is, nobody knows exactly what is happening. And, it was kind of interesting. And Albert Einstein, he had a view of global warming. He said he kind of paid close attention to the establishment theory of global warming and agreed with experiment. And he famously stated, "No amount of experimentation can ever prove me right. A single experiment can prove me wrong." And the Earth has done the kind of experiment Einstein had in mind. So we aren't absolutely sure. And I don't want to hog the time, but my concern is, are we chasing our tails and really addressing climate change where we can make dramatic changes in our environment just like that, and quantifiable and measurable? We don't have to project 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years. We'll know immediately what would happen if we did certain things like planted more trees or didn't encroach on wetlands when we were building kind of subdivisions and all that. That has a real impact. So my focus even today is I'm more interested in the environment than climate change. Now, because I think I will contribute to controlling climate change if I take care of the environment.
I totally agree with that. And I think it's interesting you brought up wetlands because, again, I think there's a lot of hypocritical messages we get in the media because we'll get bashed for driving cars around too much, but you see these big developers going through the best of Ontario's farmland and wetlands and those natural environments that are so important to our ecosystem, and you can't get back the wetlands and the really prime farmland once it's taken, right? But we see that all the time. I know there's some very personal stories about that, but no, it's I think it's very hypocritical, and we should be taking care of our own environment in our own area first before we have this grand idea of, oh my goodness, the whole world is our responsibility. Well, yeah, but your own direct area, your own direct environment, that's where you can make the biggest difference, because if everyone did that in their own environment, in their own city, in their own regions, and they advocated for their environment, well then, yeah, it would make a worldwide difference, right? So I think that's very important and a good point that you brought up about our own lands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because and the other worry with me with all of a sudden with automobiles, the magic solution is electric vehicles. I'm sorry, I don't agree. That's just it.
The factories, and the amount of
Oh yeah, like one thing, and this was about 10 years ago. A good friend of mine, Gary Sarantola, and I, we did a presentation on the life cycle of everything for the teachers at Georgian College. We have a conference once a year, and Gary and I did this, and we talked about that. When anything happens, how does that all work out? When you build an electric battery, well, just think of all the mining costs, and you're using fairly dangerous heavy metals to make things in that. And what can you really use them for at the end of life? Everybody's worried about nuclear power. Well, we know definitely what the kind of the residuals of that is, and that it has to be taken care of in that. But if you start expanding kind of the whole concept of the solution is electric vehicles on the road, I just think of the money we pay in our taxes because of all the subsidies, because as soon as the subsidies start getting pulled away, it seems to be selling less electric vehicles. So did they do it for the good of the planet, or did they do it because they save them $5,000 or $6,000 and can go around and tell everybody, look at me, I'm helping climate change. So those things worry me, and just some of the controls moving away from fossil fuels, and I think we have to. I don't argue that it's contributing. I don't have no argument that human beings are contributing to rise in temperature. Nobody knows how much it's going to rise. Like they started predictions in 1997. None of them have even came close. So we haven't seen the rise. And a book I read was her name's Judith Curry, and she was very, very involved with kind of climate change and all that, and she really kind of started steering away from it in probably around 2004 to 2005, because she saw it was actually becoming a political movement rather than a scientific. And the modeling, and she wrote a very good book with lots of research in that basically she thinks the kind of the modeling's flawed, and coming out of technology business, you can create a model to give you an answer you want. And there seemed to be more of that. But even those models were not happening. They have to continually adjust them and adjust them and adjust them. So the only reason I mentioned that, this is a very well-educated scientist who was part of the whole movement, who slowly started moving away from kind of the groupthink and saying some of this is not right. So I encourage you, Google Judith Curry and read her book. And she's not denying climate change. She's just thinking that we really still don't know what is really happening and what we can really do. So, those things I think are very important. And yeah, I mean, I think it's worthwhile touching on some of the subjects, and I'm not necessarily in agreement with all of them, but we do have to realize it's probably not the major part of climate change, but there's some natural fluctuations. We know there's been dramatic events, whether it be solar or volcanoes or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's slowed down something by years or turned in a different direction. We can't ignore it, but most of the modeling they do somewhat ignores it or just puts it in as a very small percentage of of impacting it. My understanding is, and if you went back over 100 years, there were such major forest fires in northern Ontario that, and we see it now with the ones from the west, that basically there wasn't a clear sky for almost a complete summer, and there was a dramatic change in temperatures and so forth for the next couple of years. So I just don't like we dismiss some of the natural things that occur. And what percentage, again, I'll go back to Judith Curry, we don't really know. And let's not assume it's 5%, 10%, or whatever. And, you know, those are the things that I think when you're doing your own research, just don't jump on the bandwagon is all I'm saying, because I see a lot of that. And, you know, when people say, oh, you're a denier, I said, no. But I want someone to prove to me that I should be spending another $20,000 a year doing certain things to help climate change when it doesn't make one iota of difference. And we're all, in many ways, kind of asked to do that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And it's going back to the mentality, like a wasteful mentality or a attentive mentality. Because I would agree, like regardless of what percentage of gases participate to climate change, I would simply agree with the fact that we should be attentive of it anyway, right? Both for our own case and for the greater intention of not being wasteful. Because I think in where we live today in the world, there is definitely a wasteful mentality. And I was just having a conversation recently about even like grocery stores, the amount of food that gets wasted in grocery stores when there's people literally starving on our streets, right? So being attentive to not taking what we have for granted and actually being very like safeguarding and being good stewards of what we do have in a land that has a lot of excess and plenty, but then also passing that on to the environment itself, right? It's a mentality, right? It's a mentality of taking care of what we have, both in the environment around us and in the resources that we have, right? Which is different for everyone. But I think that that's more important than switching to an electric car.
No, and I agree. And one of the worries I have, you know, the little story about the little boy cried wolf. There's a trend that, quite honestly, I don't like. As a matter of fact, when you go back to, I think it was 2009, they did surveys in that, shifting American opinion on climate change. So in 2009, people are very alarmed or concerned, added up to about 50%. And of course, when you went to 2018, maybe at the height of it or whatever, it was up to 60%. But now it's back down to 50%. So that's a little worrisome because we do have to kind of worry about it. As a matter of fact, I'll take the other side of the scale, the ones alarmed and concerned. Like, and basically in 2009, the dismissive or doubtful was 18%. It shifted some numbers. It was the same in 2018, and now it's up to 22% doubters. And I think because, you know, the scare tactics, some of the things didn't come true, you know, so people, you can tell people the same thing for enough times, but sooner or later they're going to say, that doesn't sound right. And it is important, I want to emphasize, it's important that we do take care of the environment and we do our most for climate change, but that's why I'm back to, let's take care of our environment. There's so many easy ways of doing it. And it bugs me, you know, that you see some of a shift now that, oh, plastic bags aren't that bad. No, the plastic is the biggest kind of contaminator of most things that we see, that now it's in the microplastics or into our health or into our water system.
Yeah.
And then when you kind of complicate that with the modern pharmaceuticals, we're being poisoned by plastics and pharmaceuticals in our drinking water, every day. And when you talk about fresh water, and unfortunately, this would only relate if you lived in the Barrie area. But I think it's a good microcosm of what happens. And again, it's taking care of the environment. When I was young, even up to about probably 45, 50 years ago, Barrie, all of its water came from fresh deep water wells, not the lake. It all came from there. And then they started allowing certain encroachment. And it was probably, 200 or 300 acres of wetland that extended, for anybody that lives in Barrie, from Edge Hill Drive, pretty much all the way to Ardagh Road, which is quite an expanse. It was all wetland from basically what's now 27 all the way. And slowly encroached. The first encroachment was they allowed some industrial on what's called Tiffin Street, and wrecking yards, like automotive wrecking yards. Well, I can tell you their concern for the environment was nil, or whether it was just lack of awareness or education. And they were there and there's still some there today, for many, many years. They contaminated probably half the wells. So they had to be shut down. So now in Barrie, and yes, it's grown and the population's big and all that, but now most of the water is shifting that it has to be processed out of the lake instead of fresh water. So those are the kind of things that are happening. And I look at another local area, and I'm not sure if I should, but I think it's what do you call the big organization that recognizes worldwide swamps and that wetlands. Like we have what's called menacing wetlands. And now we're dumping multiple municipalities treated effluent in there. How long can it sustain it? And you'll have certain people argue, well, swamps are the best place because they absorb things, but they also have a capacity. And my prediction is probably before my end of my lifetime, because of the permissions of a huge development just north of Barrica, I think most of the plants in there are going to be green and blue. And there's no turning back. You can't fix it. So again, I know it's environment, but that's really impacting kind of climate change.
And I think it's easy, especially if you live in a city, where you're kind of in your own little bubble, where at this point, environmental care is just kind of like a concept. It's not like a tangible thing. The most tangible thing is even driving through our streets, I see trash on the side of the road, which is disgusting and terrible. But to the person that's in a city and that's their bubble and that's where they're living and working and maybe leaving to go visit people or go visit Toronto or what have you, right? Environment is like a concept, right? It's like, oh, okay, this paper straw is helping everything out, but it's so far removed from you, right? It's not like a tangible here and now. Versus if you pay attention, there is a lot of here and now happening in the area where I live and probably in the area where you live as well. So I'd encourage people to just be attentive about what is actually tangibly impacting your environment where you actually live, and how can you make a change where you actually live to help support and be a good steward of your environment. I'm going to read from, actually this is from, so as a Catholic, this is from Pope Francis, but it's a very, very good message, whether you're religious or not. I would encourage you to listen in. But he talks about Pope John Paul II, and he says he warned that human beings frequently seem to see no other meaning in their natural environment than what serves for immediate use and consumption. Subsequently, He would call for a global ecological conversion. At the same time, John Paul II noted that little effort has been made to safeguard the moral conditions for an authentic human ecology. The destruction of the human environment is extremely serious, not only because God has entrusted the world to us men and women, but because human life itself is a gift which must be defended from various forms of debasement. Every effort to protect and improve our world entails profound changes in lifestyles, models of production and consumption, and the established structures of power which today govern societies. Authentic human development has a moral character. It presumes full respect for the human person, but it must also be concerned for the world around us and take into account the nature of each being and of its mutual connection in an ordered system. End quote. And I'll just let us sit with that because I think that's a very powerful message. I don't know if you have any reflections on that.
No, I think we've got caught up in, everybody says material world. There's no question about it. And God intended us to certainly use the gifts he gives us. And he gives us many, many gifts, our environment and food and all that. And do we take good care of it? And no, we don't. We are a selfish society. We spend what we don't have. I mean, not just us. And my worry, when I look at governments, I mean, I don't understand how you can spend money you don't have. Maybe it's my generation that, basically saved a bit. Yes, we borrowed money and we had mortgages and all that. But the plan was to pay it off before we died, and not hand it off to somebody. And that seems to be like an overall kind of negative mentality. And some people refer to our current culture as a culture of death. In some ways it is. Think of all the starving people, and, I'm not going to go into the, aspects of, your beliefs on abortion or whatever. I mean, one thing, I just read a book by a fellow that's been a lawyer. He's been chasing human rights for years and years and years, and talks about the sanctity of life. But then one of the human rights he thinks it should have is women's right to reproductive care. So what's that mean? That means even though every life is important, well, if it impacts you, it's not so important. So we've kind of twisted so many things. We've redefined what human rights are. We've redefined, freedom of speech, all those things. And so we've redefined, or some people have defined, we're in a climate crisis. I had the opportunity of kind of being in politics for a while, and I just would not support the concept, we need to pass a motion, we're in a climate crisis. I don't know. Are we? We might be. I'm not saying we're not.
And what makes more of an impact? Declaring that we have a climate crisis? Or making motions to actually help our direct environment around us?
Right.
Because one is just kind of, it's a very easy way to solve a problem, quotes, air quotes, to say that there's a problem and make sure people get behind it. Well, okay, great. You've got people's attention. But there's like a sense of, I've done something with that, which no, you haven't. And not to get into a different topic, but I feel very similar about like wearing certain types of clothing or doing certain things to say you support this or that group when, okay, that's great. It's great to show support, but actually do something. Actually connect. Actually make a difference. We can get comfortable in saying that we support something and just end at the words. We shouldn't end at the words. We shouldn't end at the carry it forward. Do something with it,
Yeah. And actually, you bring up a good point, and I did want to mention that. It's like the concept of flash mobs started 10, 15 years ago, and they were cool. People show up and all sing together. But someone picked up on that, created an organization. Oh, you want to do a protest? I'll get you people. That's not good. Because, again, there's that tune-out factor. Oh, these guys aren't really serious about it. They're just there because or whatever. And so if we want to deal with environment and climate change, as you said, we need to do something very, very specific. And it's a long time ago, and I don't know where some of my old files are, but I remember writing an article on, basically when the focus was on environment, and my emphasis was reuse, not recycle. Like, as a matter of fact, everything should be eliminated, and that was the other step, eliminate things. And we haven't done that. Like, the whole craze was, well, if we can recycle it, it's okay. Well, I just want to give you a specific example. And it's when I was a politician, and less than 10 years ago. The reality was there was a big movement to build a huge, huge recycling compost facility in this area, in our area. And I was against it. It's new. For a number of reasons, financial and that. And within 2 or 3 years after I left politics, it was stopped. And the reason being, the idea and the justification was there's so much money from selling recycled materials that it'll pay for all this facility. Well, guess what? If a recycled material was $1, it dropped to 5 cents because there was a glut of recycled materials on the marketplace because we allowed too much, material that can be theoretically recycled, but there's no homes for it. So we got led down a garden path in that one too. And that's why I would see from the environment, and again, everything's going to impact climate change. And if you slow down climate change and temperatures rising if you take care of the environment. And a good way of doing it, just think of the factories and that to make all this kind of non-recyclable materials now. It quite honestly didn't exist, when I was a kid. Everything was tin cans, cardboard, and very little plastic. Plastics was pretty much restricted to, in the 50s, not to medicine for certain things. And there's no question, it was a dramatic, good discovery. But, crash your car right now, you end up with about half a ton of plastic that probably can't be recycled. And so I think we really need to kind of focus. We can help climate change by taking care of the environment. And then, yes, we should be doing various things, but if we protect the environment, it will protect us from some of these dramatic events. But also, when we look at dramatic weather events in the last few years, and terrible fires and that, well, also, we've kind of encroached areas that are subject to fire. We don't have remediation and remedies. I think we need to focus on plans to mitigate, the impact if the temperatures are rising or it's drier, there's drought. What are the systems that we can put in place to mitigate it instead of just saying, oh my God, it's all climate change? Because that seems to be...
and the message is to us people, right? Us, civilians, low to middle class, right? Whereas let's make sure we're holding companies accountable because they're the ones producing all this, right?
Yep.
So hold them more accountable. And that's the little comment I have there.
Yeah. And so we go down a road that's a challenge, is all I can say. I definitely believe the climate is changing. I don't know how much of it's natural, how much of it is, like they're suggesting temperature rises, total human involvement, greenhouse gases, all those kind of things. I don't know for sure because there have been natural cycles and natural events, as we mentioned at the beginning. I don't know how much impact that is, but I'm willing to keep studying and reading and not form, oh my God, this is all crap. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting of the deniers just focusing on some of the natural things that happen, with our climate and say, what can we do? But I've been convinced for the last 25 years, if we took care of the environment, we slow down everything. And just as a final comment, just think about urban sprawl. How many more cars have we put on the road because of urban sprawl? Like in our area, regular commute times are 2 to 4 hours. Do you know, and again, I shouldn't go back 60 years or 70 years, but the reality is, in the city of Barrie, where I live, I don't know if there was anybody of any note that drove their car to work. Most people lived in walking distance of the factories and that, but if they were driving, it was a short drive. They weren't driving for 2 hours. And so, as a matter of fact, when I was a mayor of a municipality and I drove the ministers in Ontario crazy, because I would say to them all, Minister of Environment, Industry, all that stuff, I have the solution to all of our problems. Don't build another highway in Ontario. Let's maintain what we have. And let's focus population growth where there are jobs and where it's an easy commute. Because let's face it, the adult mental health issues, to me, I can't even imagine spending 4 hours of my day commuting. So anyway, so that may digress a bit, but take care of the environment. We will definitely start going in the right direction on climate change.
Agreed. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thank you.